Hi everyone, welcome to another A Healthy New Zealand podcast. And today I have Judy Cho with me. Judy is a meat-based nutritional therapy practitioner and author of the book, The Carnivore Cure. And I highly recommend this book. I just absolutely fell in love with Judy's infographics a few years ago. They're really
Thank you.
amazing. So Judy works with people who suffer from metabolic syndrome or autoimmune conditions, and so she helps them cure with a carnivore diet. And she holds a degree in psychology and nutrition from the University of California in Berkeley. So Judy, thanks so much for coming today. I really appreciate it. And
Thank
I
you for
wondered,
having me.
it's such a pleasure. And I wondered, you've got a really interesting backstory yourself, and I wondered if you would mind starting by sharing that, because that kind of explains how you got into using a meat-based diet for helping your
Sure.
clients.
Sure. So, let's see. I ate meat my whole life. And then probably closer to my university years, I wanted to lose a few pounds, and there was let's see, a cayenne pepper diet where basically you detox the system. And so that doctor that wrote that diet, I guess, he recommended that we limit our meats. Actually, he recommended that we remove meats. And so after doing that, I just tried to not eat meat. And that experiment lasted for 12 years or more than that. And so I stopped eating all meat. I was plant based and I occasionally ate fish, never enough. I probably had salmon maybe once every few weeks. I had tuna, canned tuna, at least maybe once a week, but it was very insufficient. And on top of that, I believed fat makes me fat. So I reduced the fat. So essentially, I was just eating a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of big salads with very little fat. I wouldn't eat the avocado. I would eat maybe eggs, but just the egg whites. And so what ended up happening is over the 12 years, I started really struggling with depression. And never once did I think it was a diet. Never once did my therapist, doctor, psychiatrist, none of them ever said the diet had anything to do with it. The other thing I started struggling with also is by the end of the night, I wasn't satiated enough, or I was still wanting something else. And so I started kind of I guess, kind of binging and just overeating carbohydrate rich foods, processed foods, microwave foods that had a lot of fat. Granted, they were the toxic seed oils or the inflammatory seed oils like canola oil, soybean oil. But I would use that. And then I was, deathly afraid I'd gain weight. And so I started using methods of restriction. So whether it was purging, whether it was using laxatives, whether it was just not eating enough one day or even excessive exercise. And I used all of that for the 12 years I started, getting really sick. Fast forward time, I got married. My husband eventually knew about my eating disorder, and we worked to heal it. But I just never, I went through eating disorder therapists. Just learned a lot because I have a background in psychology as well, and so just try to learn as much as I could, and nothing was really fixing it. And so I had my first child, and then while I was nursing my first child, I had to get on antibiotics because of mastitis, and I got really sick. I lost my memory for about a few weeks. I was sent to the mental health hospital, and they didn't know what exactly happened to me. Just Judy was acting different. And so they gave me antipsychotics, they put me on antidepressants. They just figured, you know what, she must have major postpartum depression. Granted, it was 6 months after having the baby, which is not normal. It's normally right after that happens. But still, I was severely depressed. I was under eating. I would still use behavior. So when my son would go to sleep, I was like, oh, I need to get all the baby weight off that I had gained. So I would binge and purge. And I would do these things, but while also nursing, I think it broke my body and my mental health. And so I went to eating disorder therapy intensive after that. They recommended, okay, maybe it's your eating disorder, maybe that's adding to your depression. And so I went to 10 hours of intensive outpatient care. It helped a lot. I learned a lot about my needs, um, being able to speak up for my needs. And those things are really important. But they also taught me how to eat. And one of the things was, you will never be healed from your eating disorder until you can eat in moderation. So if I should be able to eat cupcakes and I should be able to eat junk food, and as long as I can sit with it and not want to do any compensatory behavior, then I am healed. And that was sort of the logic in healing. And so I followed it. I followed everything so I could get better. Now I have a son. I can no longer be so obsessed about my weight. And so I, followed the intuitive eating, mindful eating. I would write down, what did I eat? Let's check in the middle of the meal and how am I doing? But the thing is, every few months I'd fall. And when I'd fall, I meant I would start binging again, and I would start purging again. And I just didn't understand, like, what is so wrong with me? Why am I so broken? And granted, this whole time I still was plant based. I never, ever was told, the psychiatrist would tell me, well, some people just are born with just imbalances and they may need antidepressants for the rest of their lives. There's nothing wrong with that. They told me that, I couldn't restrict carbohydrates and sugars, and that's an eating disorder behavior. But they were fully accepting of the decision that I would not eat any meat. So it was just a lot of these things that I was never aware of until basically the ketogenic diet started kind of picking up, and I started reading on it of, like, what is this crazy diet that people are eating sticks of butter and MCT oil in their coffee? And as I read into it, I learned that I was so misled with my dietary recommendations, and even in terms of mental health and gut health. And so I just started getting really passionate, and I just looked a lot into the information, and I realized that, hey, maybe the lack of meat was actually affecting my mental health and also the fat. So I actually decided to do a ketogenic diet. And the reason I did is because when I started taking the antidepressants, I listened. I was a great patient and I listened, but the thing is, within 3 months, I was on the highest dose. And then they were considering, well, let's add these add-ons that are normally for schizophrenics and bipolar patients because they also support depression for some reason. And I tried it, but it made me gain weight. And then I was just thinking, there's something wrong with this. If I have to take this for the rest of my life because my psychiatrist said it's normal to kind of take, well, why am I on the highest dose? And now I have to take other medications to possibly regulate my mood. And it just didn't make sense to me. And so that's why I started a ketogenic diet. And when I started it, I was still plant based. So then I added good fats, and that helped a lot. I mean, adding avocado oils, olive oils, and adding a lot of that did help. But again, every few months, it would happen again. I would have this craving. I don't know if it was the sweeteners in the ketogenic diet, using fat bombs, and I would eventually crave sugar. And so then I would go back to it. I'd end up binging and purging. And so finally, somebody on the internet said there is a group of people that eat only meat and they are having tremendous healing. And I was like, that is insane. And so, but my curiosity peaked. And so I looked into it, and these people seem to have a lot of healing and a lot of the things where you can eat the amount you need and you're not going to gain weight. Honestly, superficially, that attracted me. And then they just talked about healing from a lot of eating disorders. And I didn't realize, but the dogma of being plant-based was really a part of me. And I never realized that until the decision that I was like, maybe I should start including meat. And I never did it for ethical reasons. It was superficially just for weight loss. And so when I started to think of eating meat, I started considering, well, the plant-based friendly communities are so anti-meat. It's bad for the animals, the environment. And so I definitely had an ethical dilemma. But I still thought for my health and for my children, I should maybe consider eating meat. And so I took the plunge. After 12 years of eating zero beef, chicken, pork, any of that, I started eating it. Um, and initially, I had gut imbalances where it was kind of hard to digest. But over time, it healed everything that I was struggling with. And that's when I started to get mad. I was like, I struggled with an eating disorder for 12 years. I struggled with depression and anxiety and people telling me I need medication for the rest of my life and believing that narrative. When I realized it really took me to change my diet to find real healing. And that's when I started getting really passionate about nutrition. So I went to nutritional school to understand like the basics of nutrition. And then I just started doing my own research because of my psychology degree. I learned that in my trade. And so I started doing a lot of research. My graphics was from my old consulting business background time. And I realized everything was false. Like that meat is bad for the environment, that meat is bad for gut health, that meat is bad for heart disease. The more I dug, the more I realized how much misinformation I had learned and how much I was even advocating for. I used to tell people why they should be plant-based. And then I realized a lot of it is just narrative. And when I found healing, I just wanted to give back because I was really sick. I was really depressed. And I just said it in a simple story, but there were many, many dark days and many days I couldn't get out of bed and many days I didn't want to live. Um, and it was as simple as changing my diet that brought me healing, that brought me to be able to be a mom to my kids and to be a wife to my husband. And and that's why now I advocate for a meat-based diet. Now, you don't have to eat meat forever. I mean, in terms of just only meat, but maybe sometimes when we are really that sick, to do an elimination diet of just meat may provide healing. And then as you kind of remove a lot of the toxins, then you can see what you can add back and have more flexibility in your diet.
That is just such an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And there's so many components to that I'd like to sort of step into a little bit today. But I'd like to just start, not so much about the nutrition in the beginning,
Sure.
but maybe about the psychological aspects of that and about, disordered eating and a little bit about, this intense desire for weight loss and how that may relate to a lot of other women with their self-care. I'm sure that a lot of people can relate to this binging, purging, punishment, self-deprecation kind of process that goes on.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to our bodies, there's a few things. So one thing I want really quickly want to just touch upon with my story that I forgot to mention is so with my first child, because I went into the mental hospital and they put me on really heavy doses of medication and I wasn't allowed to nurse anymore. So I'll just say that. So my first son stopped nursing at about 6 months. We had some frozen breast milk that he carried on for a little bit, but essentially then he went on formula. My second son, who I've been meat based except for his first year, but otherwise I've been meat based. He is now 5 in less than 1 month and he is still nursing. And that is the power of this diet. And that's just something just anecdotally I did want to share. Now, obviously, he is not drinking the milk at all for nutrients, but just for comfort. But the fact that my body is still producing milk, it's a testament, right? But moving on to the mental health side. So, the thing is, the reality is that women are prized for their bodies and their beauty, right? And I hate that, but it's just the way our society works. Just like men are more, I guess, prized for maybe their monetary and their successes. And as much as we like don't want to say that that's a fact, there are just some truths to that, right? Like women, when they're beautiful, we think of women in their bikinis and stuff. And so as much as we're like, no, there's women's rights and all this and now women empowerment, some of that still holds true. And so when we know that, we have these expectations of what is beauty, right? So we think if you look like a supermodel, there you have beauty. And so there's always this desire to be thin. Now, um, the thinness will define based on your country or your culture, but otherwise there's always this desire to look great. And I know it's the same for men too, but I think there's a heightened amount for women especially. And so I really believe that if you don't feel your body well, then you're going to fight your body and your mind. So I always say that you can be thin even, and that definition of thin will vary, but you can have a normal body weight if you fuel your body correctly. So if your body is fueled on low nutrient dense foods, or you're not eating enough protein or other foods and that will cover your essential nutrients, then your body's going to make you, through your hormones, crave more food. So maybe you're craving chips because it wants some of the fat, and your body knows smartly that from past experience, the only way I'm going to get you to eat fat is if I make you crave your chips, right? So maybe if we eat enough fat in our steaks, or maybe a little bit of butter, maybe we won't crave the chips, or maybe it's the salt need. So that's one, is that this whole kind of struggle, this teetering of trying to find a balanced weight. One is we might just be fueling our bodies with the wrong foods. And so our body smartly will say, well, I need you to crave other things so that you can get more of the essential nutrients I need for your body to thrive. And then secondly, then it's the mental health side. So forever we will have our I guess our emotional ties to food, right? So if you think about when a baby cries as soon as it's born, the thought is, oh, maybe baby's hungry, let's feed the baby. Whenever the baby is crying, we nourish and we nurture through food. And we do that with everything in our societies, right? We celebrate with food, we cry with food, we get mad, and then we maybe drink some alcohol. Everything is surrounded by food. And so we have to acknowledge that, and maybe we need to figure out changing habits. So when you're upset, if you normally turn to food, now what are you going to turn to? And you have to, but initially work on the physical aspect of nourishment, so that when then your brain or your emotions or your past experiences crave the food, as long as your physical body's not craving it, the battle will be a little bit more easier, if that makes sense. Whereas if your physical side is also hungry, it's a losing battle. And so if you're struggling with the mental health side of wanting to be thin, first focus on nutrient density in your foods. Eat, and again, if you want to leave a little bit of plants, fine, but in general, you want to eat wholesome, real foods, and that may help the body side of it. And then you can focus on the mental health side, and just think, a lot of work I do with my clients is, well, when do you turn to food and why? And then how are we going to replace that habit for a different one, so that you self-care and that you don't turn to food anymore. And it's about changing your habits, and that's a whole different element, but a much needed one if you're going to stop turning to food, especially if you want to stay thin or a healthy body weight.
I think that's such an important point. I think a lot of people try and deal with the mental side of it, and they put a lot of rules in place, but
Absolutely.
they haven't dealt with their body's need for all those nutrients. And so, you're really fighting your biochemistry and your physiology, and it just makes it so much harder.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
oh,
sorry, I was just going to say, sometimes people crave chocolate because they're in need of magnesium. I mean,
mm,
that's the simple truth. And so
mm,
our bodies are really good at getting us to do things through our hormones, and craving things based on, well, what has motivated this person to do things in their past. And if your body kind of remembers pathways of, oh, we got magnesium through chocolate, well, let's have this person crave chocolate, right?
mm,
Not everyone believes in these theories, but essentially, if you fuel your body, and just from my personal experience, if I fuel my body well, the cravings for sweets and other junky foods are less and less. And over time, as I train my brain that I'm not turning to those foods, then it becomes easier and easier.
mm. And, the protein leverage hypothesis, really supports that, doesn't it? That we'll overeat in order to get enough protein,
Right?
and so I think of it as, a nutrient leverage hypothesis, really, and we overeat to get those nutrients. So that leads us into the healing power of meat, and I'd love you just to start wherever you think is a great place and talk. There's so much to cover about meat and plant foods. We have this impression that we need to have a lot of color on our plate, that plant foods are nutrient rich, that animal foods will make us sick and cause cancer and heart disease. I'll just let you take that away a little bit, I think. There's so much.
Yeah. So, one, your audience, if you guys are mostly in New Zealand, you guys have like the greatest quality meat. So that's wonderful, first of all. Um, but if like there's so many things that we can kind of go down, and I'll talk about a few of them. But like one, we can think of if we think of animals and even plant kingdom and just all living species, the goal is really to carry on life, right? So we want our offspring to continue, whether it's for selfish reasons, whether it's just for our continuation of life. So if we know that about that holds true, well, animals can run away from their predators, and then they can survive. Well, plants are planted in this soil, and so how are they going to protect their offspring? They can't if they can't run. So the way that they've protected themselves and evolved is by having natural toxins within their body. So if you think about poison ivy, we know that if we touch it, we're going to get sick. So we have trained ourselves, oh, we cannot touch poison ivy. Well, that kind of goes for the rest of the plant kingdom, right? So if you think about, nowadays people are aware of gluten. People with celiac disease cannot touch gluten. But there are also studies that even for plant-based folks, they say that none of us should really touch gluten because it slowly kills our gut health with every dose that we eat. And so if we know this about gluten, well, and then there's also the oxalates, which are also in kidney. When you struggle with kidney stones, the conventional doctors will put you on a low oxalate diet. They might not tell you it's oxalate related because it's like, what is that? But there are foods that they'll say, don't eat this after your kidney stone removals, and then don't eat these foods. And a lot of the don't eat foods are the low oxalate. So, I mean, the high oxalate. So they'll say no almonds, no chocolate, no spinach. Well, those are also oxalates. So even standard care recommends that. And again, oxalates at the core is an anti-nutrient. So if we understand that gluten can affect our us in terms of anti-nutrients, so it's a plant toxin, and then there are also oxalates. Well, there's also lectins and phytates, and then we can go on the list. So essentially every plant in the plant kingdom protects themselves with anti-nutrients or toxins, so that it'll teach an animal or a human, hey, you ate me and you don't feel good, so therefore don't ever eat me again. And that is the ultimate thing that we need to understand in the plant kingdom. Now, it'll depend on your individual body genetics, your metabolic health, to see if what will affect you more. But in general, all the seeds, grains, nuts, they're not helpful to your gut and in your health in general. And it can spike up autoimmune and things like that. So that's one thing. The other thing is, as our cultures are, having larger populations, we need to produce more food. And obviously, there's a lot of food waste and such. But so farmers and these big corporations are finding ways to more efficiently produce crops. And so they're using a lot more pesticides and herbicides and even the organic varieties. The example I give in a blog post I wrote recently was on carrots. So we think carrots are so good for vitamin A. But the thing is, so baby carrots, for example, and I don't know if it's the same in New Zealand, but in the US, the the conventional ones, the non-organic, they use a lot of chlorine. So the water that you see in that bag has a lot of chlorine in it. So obviously you probably want to eat the organic variety and you want to clean off the carrots. But even the organic variety, they also have a lot of water with their carrots so it doesn't dry out. But that one uses citrox. And when I looked into what citrox does, it is an antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal. So, what does that mean for our gut health when we know that our microbiome and the survival of having a decent microbiome and population is to have good bacteria? Well, if we are consuming vegetables that have these excess antibacterial toxins on them, how do we know that they're not killing some of our microbiome? And that's the part where it gets really scary. Now, if you eat the normal genetically modified variety, they use a lot of pesticides that have been proven in studies that it causes cancer. And it also, the way that GMOs work, the glyphosate or the shikimate pathway, that whole science part of it, what it does is it kills the pathway in bacteria in plants that stop the growth. And so it can kill our own bacteria. So I wonder how many of us that are just eating conventional plants that have glyphosate sprayed on it, are we killing our microbiome? And that is the core of what gives us our health, right? Without gut health, how are you going to break down your nutrients, absorb your nutrients from your good foods, and then have health? And so these are some of the concerns with plants. And when you think about meats, instead of, if we were to completely ignore everything that can be negative about plants, we have to think back in the yesteryears. We didn't have a rainbow of plants. This is modern agriculture. And even the thought of eat your rainbow is a very new concept, less than 100 years old. So 150 years ago, I mean, they weren't able to have the luxury of eating some kale and some broccoli and some tomatoes. They didn't just have that many plants. And so their focus was on, maybe you kill one large animal and you have your community be able to eat it for a while. So we have to wonder then, well, why is it that now all of a sudden meat is giving us heart disease? The question is, maybe it's not. Maybe it's meat, like the proteins with the fats, with these processed carbohydrates, that's causing heart disease. And so one of the studies that caused the belief system in the whole meats and saturated fats caused heart disease is by a study by a scientist named, or a doctor named Ansel Keys. And so basically Eisenhower, the US president, had a heart attack, and they were trying to figure out what is causing all of a sudden all these heart attacks to rise. And so Ansel Keys went out and he did studies, and he produced a paper called the 7-country studies. And he said, yes, there's a correlation with, if you eat saturated fats, you're going to have heart disease. And so therefore we should limit it. And so everyone in the world started lowering our saturated fats. So McDonald's used to use lard, or maybe tallow, I can't remember which one, but they used animal fats to cook their fries, which is better. But now they use vegetable oil because those specifically don't have a lot of saturated fats. So let's talk a little bit about that. One, Ansel Keys, he actually studied 20 something countries, but he decided to cherry pick the ones that proved his theory, right? So Chile, I think the country of Chile, they ate very little saturated fats, but they had really a lot of heart disease. So he cut them out. France eats a lot of saturated fats, and they had very little heart disease. So he cut them out. And in my Carnivore Cure book, I talk about the studies and the countries he removed. And so, but because of his studies and that research back then, it became a thing where it's okay, for sure, saturated fats, cholesterol causes heart disease. So one, we therefore need to cut down our cholesterol, and we need to cut down our saturated fats, but it just is not proven in science. Another thing I'll say is that, like in the US, our recommended daily allowance of cholesterol used to be capped. So therefore you should eat only a certain amount of eggs. And they quietly removed that cap just maybe 5 years ago. And now there is no cap on cholesterol, but they don't announce it. And we have to wonder why. Pharmaceutical companies, the number one selling drug is statins, and that is a cholesterol reducing medication. The thing I have a concern with that is, one, your body produces its own cholesterol as needed, but your body uses cholesterol everywhere. Your heart and your brain's number one fuel source is fat. And so when you think about, if our brain is about 60% cholesterol, when we are taking statins, how do we know it's not reducing some of it in our brain? And these are the scary things. And there are correlations. There are studies where people that consume statins or take statins, they also show mental health issues. They start getting depressed. They start getting very angry, violent, and all of these other things. And you have to wonder, if our brain is 60% cholesterol, and then we take statins that reduce cholesterol, how do we know it's not impacting our mental health? And so, I mean, those are some of the things. And in general, with the cholesterol, it's just not proven in science that it's the meat. Now, if you eat meat with a lot of carbohydrates, there are risks. And so it's not necessarily the meat, it's more that we're consuming a lot of carbohydrates. So your body will burn the glucose first from the carbohydrates, and then everything else will get stored in our fat cells. So it's really the combination of the two that is not ideal. And then if you just think about just even 125 years ago, if you were to look in, you could search on an internet search engine, but just 125 years ago, there was a person that was trying to sell the EKG machine, which tests the health of your heart. And a lot of doctors were like, why would I buy this? There's no heart disease. There's no heart attacks. And so he couldn't sell it. And the thing is, yes, heart disease didn't really exist 125, 150 years ago. And we were eating much more saturated fats, much more meat than we are today. And so we have to wonder, we are reducing our, like there are people that are more plant-based. There's people that are eating more, a variety of plants, but we are getting sicker than ever. Now we may live longer because we have all these medications, but is that the right answer? The last thing I'll touch upon is the environment. I love in one aspect that the coronavirus happened because while the humans were on lockdown, the animals never were. And so while I go through actual science in my book and explain how we really come up with greenhouse gas emissions and animals are very low on it, if you actually go through like the Environmental Protection Agency's numbers, but the easy one to think of and consider is during the pandemic, we were all locked away and the animals were not. And during that time, we had the cleanest air in years and decades. And if we have to wonder, is it really our animals that are getting blamed for so much of the greenhouse gas emissions? Or is it humans, industrial stuff, and all the other things that we are doing with our planes and our industries producing a lot of these greenhouse gas emissions?
And that's such a good point. How do we counteract this focus on the environment? I was talking with a friend just a few days ago who eats a carnivore diet, and her children are quite concerned that she doesn't have the rainbow. And she sent them a lot of information about nutrient bioavailability from a carnivore diet compared with a plant-based diet and all this stuff. And so rather than talking about that and answering that aspect of it, they immediately switch to the environment and they say, well, you're killing the environment, you know. So how do we counteract that? How do we, you know, such a strong message out there at the moment, especially in New Zealand. You talked about our beautiful meat. Gosh, you know,
Yeah.
they want us not to eat our beautiful meat and to eat plants.
So I don't know the details of the agriculture and cropping in New Zealand, but I do know that some of the studies actually cited in my book was from Australia, and they talked about how, so in general, when we monocrop, meaning that we use like only corn or only soy, and we produce a lot of foods with that, and then we are not refueling the soil with new minerals and a variety of plants, or having the cows kind of with their soil. If we don't do that and we're only using like genetically modified soy, or maybe it's not even genetically modified, but essentially what we're doing is we're depleting the soil over and over and over again. And essentially that soil that we are cropping on will become barren. And so if we think of that, is really the agriculture or the environmental aspect with raising cows or other animals really that negative compared to what we're doing with the plant-based world? There's so much that I can go into with this. One example, I don't think I brought this up in the book. Maybe I did, but to raise one almond in California, which California raises majority of all the almonds in the US, it requires 1 gallon of water, and they raise it in the most drought prone part of all of California, and California's drought prone in general. So what about all the resources to get the water there? What about all the resources to even grow almonds and on top of that, they also pasteurize all of these almonds. So they have their own toxicities from that alone too. We don't consider all these other nuances. A lot of the organic foods we get in America are brought in from other countries. What about the footprint of the plains? Even getting New Zealand meat, which we get a lot of, especially the lamb. What about that footprint for the US, right? We think, oh, just an animal in now, if your animal is not pasture raised, there's a little bit more of a footprint, but it's minimal compared to everything else that we do, whether it's raising plants in a drought prone country or state, whether it's we're monocropping and making our soils basically non-existent. So then we have to start doing like hydroponic strawberries where they're growing in non-natural states with just water, right? So how much of a footprint is that where we're using up all this good water when as our population grows, we need cleaner and cleaner water. So these are some of the thoughts that are not considered in these arguments when we say, well, cows are ruining our environment. If you look into the details and then compare it to, well, what am I eating on my plate? So how did my kale get here? How did my broccoli, spinach, etc.? What's the water print? What's the carbon footprint on that? And we don't think of these things. And again, what about all the pesticides used to spray our plants? And then it gets in the air, gets in our waters, and the residual effects on that and the effect on our ozone, right? We don't think of all of these things. And it's so easy to buy into the narrative of meat is bad. And I did research actually on vegan and vegetarianism, because I was pretty much vegetarian for 12 years of my life. And the thing is, as much as there's been so many great movies, I would say agendas that are pushing plant-based, if you look at the actual numbers, at least in the US, it's less than 5% of the population are actually vegan and vegetarian. And of that, I think maybe 1% is vegan. And then of the vegans, it's more than half eventually no longer do vegan, because I don't think it's an essential diet that makes sense for a human. We have to think that if a diet requires us to supplement with man-made supplements, maybe it's not the right diet for us, right? So if you are vegan, you have to supplement vitamin B12. There are other things you have to supplement. You need to make sure and eat enough fat. We have to wonder again, is it the right diet when we have to supplement, right? And I know a lot of people will then put the argument of, well, we have to care for the animals. We have to practice self-care, self-love, do no harm. Well, then what about the harm that you're putting on your own self and then your offspring, right? So let's say you care for your animals so you don't want to eat them. Well, then what if you have mental health struggles, your gut issues, and all of that can get passed down to your child? And then you have to eat, and you're not supplementing well and your health is declining, but so you saved one animal. Is that really self-caring for the planet? I mean, the strains and costs on a human being unhealthy is very expensive. You can't work anymore. You have to go to the doctor. You have to fill the hospital, right? All of these things. And then the care for your child. What if you can't care for your child because you're sick? I believe that life is just a circle of life. So if I'm healthy, my kids are healthy, and then one day we get buried in the soils, we'll make more nutrient dense soils because I ate animals that were nutrient dense. And then when they eat the grass, they will be that much more nutrient dense. And it's this circle of life. Yes, we should absolutely care for our animals and treat them well and honor them and all of that. But I think the information is very short when it comes to ethical, environmental. It's the data just is not there.
It, it's sort of an appealing narrative without any,
Totally.
without any substance behind it. All right, well, let's get on talking about meat and the nutrients in meat. So, you already talked about the B12, which I think is a classic, well, probably the definitive argument really for why we evolved to eat meat, because if we didn't evolve on meat, we wouldn't have this essential need for vitamin B12 to start off with, which is not
Right.
provided in any plant food. So there's a whole lot of nutrients, there's amino acids, there's ratios of amino acids, there's bioavailability. Can you go into a little bit of that and explain what that actually means for people?
Yeah. So the way that the nutritional world, nutritional science came up with the need for our protein count was they used breast milk as the golden standard. So if you think about that, what they did is they went into breast milk and they broke out, okay, what is the amino acid composition of breast milk? And they figured that out. And then so they first tried it on kids and they're like, this seems to work. And so then they proportionally increased the same amounts for adults. And that is how we have our amino acid requirements for protein on a daily basis. If you remember, if you understand that, well, breast milk has very little vitamin C1, because that's an argument that people will say against animal-based foods, is that there's not a ton of vitamin C, but breast milk does not have vitamin C, or has very minimal amounts. But the other thing is, then when you look at the plant breakdown of protein, it also has not the kind of complete panel of all the amino acids you need. I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on, but the complete panel of the amino acids is also not as proportional to if you were eating meat. So a lot of plant proteins like soy protein, pea protein, they might be really low in methionine, or some of them don't have it at all. They might be missing one amino acid. And so then they don't consider it a complete protein. Whereas meat, they typically have a good balance of all the amino acids. And what amino acids really are is just when you consume meat, they break down into proteins, which break down into amino acids so that your body can break it down and use it. And amino acids are the building blocks for everything in your body. So we definitely need it. And so, I mean, in terms of protein and just in bioavailability, essentially the key thing to really note here is that everything that we say is so nutrient rich in vegetables and plants are in versions that our body cannot directly use. So if we say, well, we should eat carrots for the beta carotene, which then get converted to vitamin A. Well, there are a lot of genes and people with certain genetics that the vitamin A does not get converted to vitamin A. So then they may not use the beta carotene, right? So as much as they'll say carrots have X amount of vitamin A, does it really, right? Same thing goes with iron. Plants have the non-heme iron version and the meats have the heme iron. So we directly use the heme iron. So the non-heme iron again needs to get converted. Same thing with vitamin K. So plant versions of vitamin K is K1. We use K2 in the body. So if your body doesn't convert it to K2, then again, there's the issue. There's so many things like that. So you just have to think of, well, if the meat has the easiest version to just absorb by the body and it doesn't need to convert it and do extra work. Well, when your body is sick or you have gut health that is impaired, it's just makes more, you just are taking the safer bet by eating the versions that your body can naturally absorb versus the plant ones that then need to be converted. You need to have good gut health so that this and that can kind of enzyme work and the chemicals can all work together so then it gets converted. That's why I think you see a lot of malnutrition in vegans. They think they're getting all this in broccoli, they're getting all these nutrients, but I beg to differ and wonder if you're actually getting a lot of those absorbed. And so when your gut health is impaired, even with impairment, your best chance of getting the most nutrients will be through meats.
Mm. Would you talk about fiber a little bit as well, just while we're talking about gut health and meat?
Sure. So the thought is that we need lots of fiber so that they produce short chain fatty acids to then give fuel to our intestines and our microbiome, and it produces diversity and all of that stuff. So the first thing I'll say is, one, obviously we didn't eat a ton of veggies in our past, just the color of them, I'm saying. Usually we had maybe one plant food in our diet even 100 years ago. But the second thing is really the word butter comes from butyrate, which is the and it's the Latin word of butyrate, and both of them are derived from that. So short chain fatty acids from plants are supposed to convert to butyrate for fuel for the large intestine. Well, butter is derived from the same word as butyrate. So, and there are studies that show that actual butter has more butyrate per ounce than any plant fiber does. So there are some people that kind of discount that argument, but the other thing is when you eat a meat-based diet, you are running on more fat than you are running on glucose. And so you may produce more beta hydroxybutyrate, which is a ketone. And so from all my clients, from their blood work, from their gut health, I have just seen so much tremendous healing, right? So I have clients that suffer from small intestine bacterial overgrowth, colitis, ulcerative colitis, C. difficile, MRSA, and just IBS, IBD, and just the whole gamut, and even H. pylori. And they have done the paleo diet with adding a ton of vegetables. They've done vegan diets. They've tried all the fiber rich diets. And instead of getting better, they got sicker. And so they finally I'm at my wit's end. I've taken medication. I've done colonoscopies. It is not healing. And so when they start a meat-based diet, they finally get some healing. And that on my YouTube channel, there's an episode where I interviewed a doctor that released a white paper on how his patients in his practice, they used a carnivore diet instead of the common antibiotics route, other supplement routes to eradicate SIBO. And he has seen some efficacy by just following a meat-based diet. And so he published in the BMC and gastroenterology journal that a carnivore diet can actually support gut health. So that is the power of a meat-based diet. Now, the thing about diversity, it's true, when you are eating a meat-based diet, your diversity may be less. But what if we don't need as much diversity as we think, right? So the way that they came out with the whole microbiome and how best a microbiome should look is they got a pool of healthy people and then they analyzed the strains that are in that person's microbiome. And then they did the same with sick people and they found commonalities. Well, these people are eating more of a standard American diet or a plant-rich diet. So what if you are eating just meat-based and you're healthy? Yes, maybe your microbiome isn't as diverse, but if you have no health issues and you're not on medication and you're healing your thyroid, you're healing your gut health, do we really need that level of diversity? There's just, and granted, it may be anecdotal, but even with that BMC enterology or gastroenterology study, we are showing that doing an elimination diet with just meat and removing a lot of the toxins are actually having people heal. So maybe fiber is not as hyped up as it needs to be.
What about for the people who start a higher meat-based diet and suffer from constipation?
So typically,
That's a common problem.
yes. So typically constipation happens when you are eating too much protein and not enough fat. So I am a big advocate, especially in the beginning while you're starting your journey, to eat a ketogenic version of carnivore, meaning that your fat is sufficient. So a lot of times just eating a lot of meat and not enough fat will cause constipation. Sometimes it's in a deficiency in electrolytes. So you make sure that you're getting enough salt, you're hydrating enough. I think on average, your hydration amount should be about half of your body weight in ounces. So I know you probably use different metrics, but if I'm 130 pounds, I want to drink about 65 ounces of water. So that's an example, but you want to make sure to consume more salt. When you are eating a meat-based or a ketogenic diet, your body retains less water just because when you are consuming sugar, you have molecules of water that are next to that glucose molecule. When you have less glucose in your body, you're going to have less water molecules. So that therefore, then you will need more electrolytes in general. So sodium is really important. The low salt diets, again, is a band-aid for metabolic health. It's not really the sodium that is causing all of that. So make sure to get enough electrolytes, make sure that you're eating enough fat. And then if you are eating heavy cheese, you want to limit that as well. I've seen a lot of people will kind of crave something else. So their bridge food is the cheese, and then they'll overdo eating a lot of cheese. If you eat some shredded cheese, at least in the States, they add a lot of like potato starch, cornstarch, and fillers to have the cheese not stick, and that can cause constipation. When I say a lot of fat, I mean if you're eating, let's see, and I don't know what, so I don't remember what the ribeye is called in New Zealand, but it's the fattiest cut of the beef. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. But if you think of the fattiest meats, you still want to add about 1 to 2 tablespoons of fat. And that's what I mean by extra fat. So it's a lot. In terms of calories, it's about 70 to 80% of your total calories would come from fat. So it's pretty high fat. So if you're eating like chicken wings, you would probably if you're eating like 10 chicken wings for a meal, you probably need to add about 3 to 4 tablespoons of fat. And so it's a lot. Now, but it helps.
Want to know what sort of fat you're adding.
Yeah, so I use butter because I can tolerate it. Raw butter is the best because then it's not pasteurized. They're not adding, they're not removing a lot of the digestive enzymes that your body needs to break down milk. I mean, just like breast milk, we don't pasteurize our milk. Now, obviously, you have to trust your farmer. There are people that do get sick from raw milk, so you definitely have to trust your farmer. But So butter's one, tallow, suet. Suet is like the fat around the cow's kidneys, but a lot of people don't like it because it's really chewy. So you just have to find the animal fat that works for you. Sometimes I do recommend olive oil if you know that it's a high quality source and it's not cut with other seed oils. Sometimes that helps raise HDL. So I say eat the one that you can do long term, and I wouldn't worry about which specific fat that you're using. Obviously, never eat the seed oils like sunflower oil. No, not sunflower. Sometimes sunflower is in the gray area, but soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, all of those are super rancid, highly inflammatory. So as soon as they come in your body, they are toxic and they cause inflammation. Um, the canola oil is made from a toxic plant, and they did some finagling in the labs to make it less toxic. And the reason why they use that oil is because, again, back in the Ansel Key days, it has less saturated fats. So they felt like it was a perfect oil. It was cheap to cook with. And now they're using that everywhere, but it's slowly killing us.
Mm, mm. I did a great podcast with Tucker Goodrich.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Do you know Tucker?
Right.
Yeah. So he talked about all those pathways and how vegetable oils are killing us. So yeah. So where did we get to? I sort of interrupted you while asking you about what what fats you would recommend, but you were talking about the importance of the ratio between protein and fat in the initial stages with the constipation. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So essentially, once you are, I like to use levers and measures within the own body because I think our body has our own innate wisdom. If you listen to your body enough and stop feeding it chemicals, it can actually process things and let you know if things are bothering it. So initially, you may need to do a high fat version of carnivore just for healing. Um, your hormones need fat for production, and then your thyroid needs meat and iodine for production. So you want to get a good balance in fat and meats. And then once you are kind of assimilated, meaning that your periods are stable, you're not getting your hot flashes, you're sleeping mostly through the night, and you just feel your energy's pretty good, then maybe you can dial down fat and protein however you need it to be. Now you want to make sure and eat sufficient protein so that you are supporting your lean body mass, which supports your longevity. So you definitely want to do that.
That's great. And so this is where we're talking about that leverage between your nutrient density and then your energy intake, aren't we? And I think it's fairly clear that we shouldn't really be combining fat with carbohydrates as well, that that's a bit like putting petrol on the fire.
Yeah. So I think if you're eating veggies and you add a little bit of fat, like you saute your, I don't know, asparagus with a little bit of oil, I think that's fine. It's more when you're eating, like a full hamburger with the bread, the tomatoes, the ketchup, right? All of that sugar. And then you finish it off with an ice cream at the end of the meal. That's when the combination of both is super toxic to the body.
Mm. And maybe all those vegetable oils that get added into the dressings and things that we're adding
Absolutely.
on. Well,
Yeah, a lot of the bread, like at McDonald's in the United States, they add canola oil to the bread. You would never think so. They add corn syrup to the bread because it makes it, a little sweeter, so it tastes better. But it's highly not ideal.
Well, we talk for a moment about hormones because you just mentioned hormones, and we have, a lot of women in particular with feeling that they have hormonal issues and that a lot of their health problems are because of hormonal issues. And so there's a lot of debate about taking exogenous hormones and hormone replacement and things like that. What are your thoughts about that? Do you feel that if we heal ourselves first, that some of those hormonal issues will dissipate, or?
Yeah, so obviously I'm not diagnosing or, giving medical advice, but in general, what I've seen in my practice is that if you nourish your body enough, you should be able to not take exogenous hormones. The thing I'll say about the hormones is that if you look into the cholesterol cortisol pathway and you look at all the hormones in that process, a lot of our sex hormones, like our progesterone, will go down a certain path. And so all of them kind of start with cholesterol. And so your body will prioritize survival over everything else. So if you're highly stressed or you're eating a lot of sugar and that's causing cortisol spikes because blood sugar and insulin. And then if that's not working well enough, then your cortisol has to come to balance your blood sugar. And so if you are using excess cortisol, your body, and you're not eating enough, or even if you're eating enough, your body will prioritize producing cortisol, which is the stress hormone, which is the survival hormone. That will be prioritized over producing DHEA, estrogen. They're all on the same kind of map of how cortisol gets made. And again, it starts from cholesterol. So if you're eating low fat, your body's going to use the fat within your body. And then it's going to say, sorry, I don't care if you're losing your hair. I don't care if you're not getting your period. I need you to survive another day. So I'm going to use all the raw materials I have to produce cortisol. So when people are supplementing with estradiol or progesterone, we don't know if it's actually going to go and produce more cortisol instead of actually giving you the alleviation of progesterone. Now, some people say they do feel better, but how do you know that some of it's not just going and fueling the fire of cortisol? I think you should get to the root cause of why you're imbalanced. And the other thing is, we just don't know what hormones will do, right? It's a chemical kind of makeup. And we don't know when we're injecting one, what it's going to do to the rest of the body. And that's the scary thing about hormonal replacements, in my opinion, is that you want to get to the core of why there's an imbalance. 200 years ago, they never had these hormone replacements. Granted, we don't know all of their health issues, but I have to wonder if it's because we're highly stressed and we're eating the wrong foods that are not fueling our bodies to then produce the hormones we need to, and then also managing our stressors in our lifestyle. And so instead, we say, let's just take some exogenous medication. But I mean, from what I've seen in my clients, and I've worked with hundreds now, it doesn't work long term. So maybe it'll help or alleviate for a little bit, but then they're either gaining weight or they're just not feeling as good, or they have to up their dose. And then the same thing happens with thyroid medication. What is the cause of the thyroid imbalance, right? A lot of times, so first of all, your T4 is produced by tyrosine, which is an amino acid from meats. And then it's also produced with iodine. And then to convert your T4 to T3, you need zinc and selenium, and the iodine gets cleaved off the T4. So if we know these things, one, a lot of our foods don't have iodine. Maybe we're mineral poor. We're talking about our soils are less rich in minerals. And so even if our cows are eating the soil, there's less minerals in general. So maybe there's a deficiency in minerals, and maybe we don't have to first go to medication. Now, I know if you're sick and you're having really low energy, you may need it temporarily, but I always say get to the root cause. Our bodies are not broken enough that we have to medicate just to survive. I would focus on change your dietary habits, change your work habits, lifestyle, reduce your toxin load. Figure out what is causing things to be imbalanced, because ideally our bodies should be able to respond naturally to the environment without taking any medication just to be like the other average person.
Mm, that's really, really good advice.
Thank you.
Weight loss. A lot of people have gone to keto and also to carnivore to try and lose weight. We kind of cycle back to what we were talking about in the beginning.
Sure.
They get some initial success and then they stall.
Yeah, I see that a lot.
Really frustrated, and they go back to what they were doing before.
Yeah, so and that kind of goes to what I was talking about. Like so I view carnivore and keto as healing diets. And they should be viewed as long-term lifestyles. So initially, what you needed to do to kind of correct the course of any metabolic disease healing, we may have needed to just dial down the insulin, and that's where you can use more of the high fat. But over time, when your body is now functioning at a new normal, you may have to dial down the fat, right? So if you're gaining weight or you're stalling, maybe now the fat is in excess and your body's like, okay, I'll store it because I don't know what to do with this excess fat that you're consuming, right? There are different levers to pull. I don't think it's just that, oh, this diet didn't work for me. I mean, obviously the other diet you were using wasn't working, therefore you came to keto and carnivore. But I would just look at your food sourcing. So I'm not as stressed about if it's grain fed and grass fed. I know that there's some differences in those, but it's not the biggest thing that moves the needle. When I say sourcing, I mean, are you eating mostly processed meats? Are you eating just processed sausages in a bag or in a container versus like getting meats from your farmer or even in the grocery store, like just, no ingredient foods? That's where I would first focus on. And then you have to maybe play with your macros, right? So are you craving more foods because your digestive health is imbalanced? And as we were talking about, your body will crave more food if you're not getting enough nutrition. And maybe if your gut health was good, you're eating sufficiently, but because it's not ideal, maybe your body needs you to eat more to get the amount that you actually need. So maybe we become more efficient with breaking down our proteins and fats by doing some gut healing, right? So there are always levers to consider rather than just saying, oh, this diet is broken, I'm now gaining weight. I would look into why, because for so many and in so much science, they show how healing this diet can be, but you may just have to tinker with things. I'll personally share mine. So I'm probably 10 pounds or I don't know, 5 kilograms heavier than um, when I was plant-based. Do I want to be thinner? Sure. Right. But I also know that I'm in front of my desk all the time. I have young kids, which will probably increase my cortisol need. And I don't exercise and move as much as I used to. So one thing I tried is I started including 3 days of getting my heart rate up, and it's helped a little bit. And also I notice if I just clean up my diet. So if I'm eating more beef jerky and cheese, those things are a little less satiating than if I eat just a steak or if I eat some ribs or some other, meat-based nutrient dense foods. And so these are things to consider. Everyone will have different things. Now, one big thing I see for a lot of my clients where they plateau even in healing is when they don't reduce their stress load. And the stress load is much bigger than I think most people give value to.
Mm. Yep. And sleep, how many
Oh,
calories
sleep is huge too. Yeah.
bed, not sleep, yeah, so sleep is a real problem. So would you touch on what kind of conditions you've seen or you've been able to heal quite well with the carnivore approach?
Yeah,
And
so I focus on gut health. So I would say I have not seen a gut health symptom that I could not support with a meat-based diet. So again, like I've mentioned several of them earlier. So anything, if you're suffering from colitis, Crohn's, any of the gut-based issues, I would strongly consider a meat-based diet. Even if you want to eat plants, if you think about the anti-nutrients in plants and the toxins, even from the pesticides, if your gut needs a break so it can work on actually healing the gut, then you want to stop adding other toxins to the gut that would then have to focus on just removing the toxins rather than actually healing the body. So for gut health, absolutely everything I've seen. Now, some obviously take more work. Some of my clients need to take some probiotics or some supplements to kind of heal. And those are the ones that maybe we're taking a lot of antibiotics, so they may not have any type of microbiome really. And then just a lot of things. So mental health, autoimmune, let's see what else. Like even inflammation, not so ideal cholesterol markers, A1C, so blood glucose levels, just really metabolic disease is a huge one. I think it doesn't have to necessarily just even be only meat based, but removing a lot of the carbohydrates in a person's diet, including fruits, if you're eating it in excess, or if you have a lot of metabolic disease, I have seen wonders work on metabolic disease by removing a lot of the carbohydrates.
for people with methane-based SIBO,
Mhm.
how do you find the carnivore diet works for them? And what about, a lot of people seem to have sulfur
Intolerance.
allergies. Yeah, and they seem to struggle a lot more on a carnivore diet as well.
So the methane, whether it's methane, hydrogen, or sulfur, the sulfur one's a little bit trickier, but both of those, a meat-based works. They have to figure out which meats they can tolerate over others. So it does get a little bit trickier, and that's where it just needs to, it's smart to work with a practitioner to kind of figure out, okay, I've tried these and these don't work. With the sulfur sensitive clients, that's a band-aid to remove all sulfur type foods long term. You need sulfur to produce glutathione, and glutathione is what is the master antioxidant in the body. So you don't want to eat a sulfur free diet. Maybe you could do it really short term, but you don't want that long term. Now, there are certain meats that can, I guess, exacerbate the sulfur. And so if you are eating, you want to probably stay away from the like gelatinous, collagen-rich foods for a little bit, just the meat. So if you're eating like a New York strip, there's a connective tissue part that looks kind of iridescent. You want to not eat that just for a little bit as you're healing. But overall, once you, let's say, find a baseline of meats that you can kind of tolerate just for a little bit, as you work on healing your gut, then you should be able to eat more of the sulfur-rich foods. And if you're not, then it's just, there's still, again, it's a band-aid. If you just say, okay, I'm just not going to eat X, Y, Z, instead figure out what's the root cause, work on that, and then you should be able to tolerate more foods.
A lot of people talk about histamine intolerance as well. And I've seen a lot of people convert to carnivore and then feel that that actually aggravated their histamine intolerance.
Yeah, I talked to Dr. Cy West about this recently. So a couple thoughts. Lately, anybody that is histamine intolerant, they just say anything allergic response is a histamine, but by the medical terms, it may not be. Some people do suffer from mast cell. Some people do respond in certain things. We just don't know with absolute certainty. I've tried. So some of the thoughts is when you have histamine responses, it could be that you're deficient in copper or vitamin C. I've tried that with some of my clients that are histamine intolerant. That is not normally the answer. Sometimes it could just be that your body now is running with really cleanly, right? So if you compare yourself to a car, and if your car is just really refined, you're using the good oils, good gas, and now your machine is just, working really well. Well, then if you add like a toxic gas to the car, it's gonna let you know it's not running as smoothly. And so some of the thought is that maybe if you reduce milk for a long time and then all of a sudden you consume dairy, you may feel stomach pain because now all of a sudden you need the digestive enzyme that breaks down lactase, but you may not have a lot of it because your body's like, well, why am I going to make an enzyme that I don't need to be producing if you're not consuming dairy? So I think the proper way to do an reintroduction of anything is to slowly introduce it, let the immune system kind of know like, hey, I'm going to start trying to introduce broccoli and maybe eat like small little florets rather than a full serving of it. And that's probably the smarter way to slowly ease your immune system into it. But I just wonder if it's, is it part that our immune system is so clean now so that when we try to introduce other, not as ideal foods, now we have an intolerance. And it really will depend on the individual. And this is where testing can be ideal. But maybe doing a stool test, maybe now that you're reducing all the toxins, your body is showing other ailments because it finally is trying to reduce some of the toxins it's been storing. And now it's coming out and now it's manifesting as illness. But maybe this has all been stored and you're just going through like a Herxheimer effect of where you're trying to heal the body. And so initially you feel worse than when you feel better.
Mm. Fantastic. Judy, would you tell us a little bit about your book, The Carnivore Cure, because you cover a lot of this information in that book, and I think it would be a great resource for people.
Yes, thank you. So my paperback is only in the US. We can send it out to New Zealand and we've sent out several, but unfortunately it was self-published. So we don't have a publisher outside of the US to just make the shipping costs cheaper. So we don't have a person that sells it outside. So it has to be sent out from the US. Otherwise you can buy it through Amazon as an audiobook or an ebook. And essentially the Carnivore Cure, it's all about a meat-based diet. So if you're concerned about everything that we've talked about, it is touched upon in the book. If you are considering gut health, it's talked about why carbohydrates and excess sugar can be problematic. It talks about the environment. It talks about deficiencies that people are afraid of, like electrolytes, antioxidants, vitamin C, fiber. I talk about a lot of that. And then there's a whole holistic health chapter as well. So it talks about stress and sleep and just community and the importance of touch. And then there's also, if you are planning on doing this as an elimination diet, I kind of give you the steps of what to do on week 1, week 2, and then how to slowly reintroduce probably the least anti-nutrient, least toxic plant foods. And then you can slowly introduce them. And then there's even a chapter on properly preparing any nuts, seeds, or grains if you do choose to eat that. I have to be realistic with what people are willing to eat and not. And so it's just talking a lot about nutrition, why meat-based is ideal, but just talking about the intricacies of meat, fats, and why sometimes plant is not necessarily ideal.
Thank you. Well, I think people would really enjoy your book. I have the Kindle version, and I think
Thank
it's
you.
a great book. I mean, I love the infographics.
Thank you.
And I actually share a lot of your infographics on LinkedIn and Facebook because I just think they're
Thank you.
really, I think they're fantastic, and they really capture the essence of the message really, really beautifully. And it's a book that you don't have to sort of read from the start to the end either.
Yes.
You've got a ton of chapters, and you can just go in and pick out
Right.
the
No,
parts
exactly.
that are really relevant. So I think it's an excellent investment for people. So to finish up, I'm a mum and a grandma, and you're a mum, and I'm really concerned about the health of the children in New Zealand. Our obesity epidemic, childhood obesity epidemic is just escalating. Childhood health is deteriorating. Would you just finish by maybe giving some advice to parents about feeding their kids?
Yes. So when I first became a nutritional therapist, I wanted to actually teach kids how to eat and how to feed our children. And I realized if I don't work with adults, it's never going to matter. And so that's why I switched to just going to adults. But my heart has always been for the kids. When I got sick, my ultimate thing was I never want my kids to suffer the way I did, whether it's mental health, whether it's my gut, whether it was because I chose to be plant-based. The biggest things I'll recommend is that first of all, a lot of parents, we are so into snacking. So my first son, because I was plant-based and I had no idea what I was doing, my son was eating applesauce, pouches and kid pouches all the time. And he was probably having like 200 grams of carbs. I don't even know how much exactly, but he was eating round the clock. And then when mealtime came, we would kind of have to fight him to eat, and he wouldn't want to eat. And so he really lived off of food pouches a lot. And I remember thinking it's so hard to feed kids. And then I would look into how to feed your kind of picky eaters and stuff. And the more I got into nutrition, I realized it's just not there. If your child is hungry enough and you don't feed your child junk food or processed food or snacking, your child will be hungry, and one of the foods that they will love to eat is meat. Now, some kids do have a texture thing, so you're going to have to find the meat that they like. But in general, we have to train our kids and trick our kids to eat veggies, but we don't have to really do that with meat. They will eat it if they're hungry. And so it's not that hard. My oldest, when he up to the age of 3, he was still eating very plant-based, and I probably rarely fed him meat. But he is now mostly meat based, and he is able to change. And it was a battle a little bit. So for the first few weeks, he didn't want to eat. So we just were like, don't eat. But eventually he got hungry. And now my son is almost 7, and I'd say he eats over almost a pound of meat a day. He eats mostly meat based. And then at the very end of the meal, if he wants a dessert, sometimes he wants ice cream or sometimes he wants fruit, I'll give him some, because again, I'm also mindful about disordered eating. But I focus on the protein and fat first. So in the mornings they eat, I don't know, like 4 eggs with like 4 pieces of bacon or several ounces of meat. And in the mornings they'll have some raw goat's milk. So and then they have a dinner. So we rarely let them snack. And then at dinner they'll have a good portion of meat. They'll have some fat, maybe they'll have some bone broth, and then afterward they'll maybe have like 10 to 20 grams of sugar, if they choose to. But, there's days that they might have some pizza, but in general, my kids never ask for snacks now. They are very nutrient dense, right? So they can go for 5, 6 hours without eating. And granted, sometimes they'll say they're hungry, but in general, they're not like the other kids that are eating every hour. They want a snack, they want a juice. When we are starting their way of eating with fruit and too much sugar, we're making them go from like keto or fat burners to now becoming glucose burners. And the thing is, we talked about how the brain is 60% fat. So if we are not fueling our kids with good fats at a very young age, well, our brain is almost completely developed by the age of 5. It is imperative at that age, right? We focus on breast milk and that the importance of breast milk. But after the age of 1, it shouldn't stop. We need to focus on meat heavy, good fats to fuel their brain so that they don't have mental health issues, at least until the age of 5. And then from there, if you want to add some carbs, that's fine. I mean, I think they can tolerate a little bit more carbs than us, but make it the last part of the meal, right? Let them their bodies fuel themselves with good meats and good fats. And it's saddening. My kids they went to a preschool, and then there was like at least 20% were obese. And these are kids that are under the age of 5. And you just can't imagine, right? We see so many more allergic reactions popping up, right? So now my kids can't bring their own snacks to school because they say that oh no, they said that the school is not offering any more snacks because there are just so many allergies going around and people have nut allergies, tree allergies, and all these things. And so they said, you have to bring your own foods because we just can't handle all the different allergies. But why are our allergies coming up, right? A lot of our immune system, like we're talking about, is in our small intestine. And a lot of our gut health will come from our parents. So if our kids already are sicker because we are not as healthy as our like parents and great grandparents, and then they're just living off of sugar and grains and stuff that are affecting their gut, well, I'm not surprised why they have so many allergic responses. In my Carnivore Cure book, I talk about how asthma is absolutely related to gut health and just health of the child. So if your child is struggling from asthma, if you clean up their diet, the struggles with asthma will dissipate. And that's with a lot of allergies. And my kids now, my first son, when he first went to school, he was still plant-based. He got sick with everything. And now my kids, my youngest, they never get sick. I mean, obviously they get the common cold and stuff, and that's good and healthy. That's how you boost your immune system. But in general, they are just really, really strong, healthy kids. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I found this diet at a very young age for them. And I think that if parents struggle with their kids eating, with their kids' health, even if they're having a lot of temper tantrums and obesity and whatever the things are, I'd really strongly consider a meat-based diet. That doesn't mean that you have to remove all sugar. You can give them some apples or, whatever it may seem that makes sense. But ultimately, you'll have to change your diet in order to teach your kids to want to change theirs.
When you say sugar in that context, what you're really meaning is carbohydrate, aren't you? Just in case some people think you're giving them teaspoons of sugar.
No. Yeah. No, I mean carbohydrates. And sometimes they eat ice cream, which is loaded with sugar, but I try to get higher quality ones or lower sugar ones. I never get ones with artificial food dyes. So there's certain things I have parameters around. Like I try not to have them eat MSG and other neurotoxic foods. But in general, I mean, really, I try to have nothing off the table because I'm very mindful of the disordered eating aspect, but they eat very little of it. So my kids, even if they eat some pizza one day, if you check their ketones the next morning, they still have some. Like they're typically fat burners. And I think that's the ideal is while they're growing and their bodies are growing, I want to make sure that the raw materials I'm giving for the body are the most nutrient dense so that they can have the strongest immune system, strongest brain and body, so that as they're older, then they can fight disease better.
Mm-hmm. Just generally be pretty healthy, normal, metabolically flexible kids that can tolerate
Yes.
a wide range of foods, really, without all these reactions.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time. I could keep talking to you about things like food colorings and, I mean, it could go on forever. But you have a great blog. We've talked about your book. Where else can people find you and follow you? You're on YouTube, so there's a lot of places people can get more information and hear you talk about all these topics.
Yeah, thank you. Again, thank you for having me. So I have a YouTube channel, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all under Nutrition with Judy. So like you mentioned, I do graphics where I kind of explain why meat-based is healthy and why, if we don't have enough vitamin C, why it's okay. And I talk about that. And I also have a podcast where I interview like experts in the field, specialists, and even just people in the community that share their healing journey of how I just had someone not that long ago I think she was almost 80 and she's healed so much of her body by eating a meat-based diet. And so she just shares her journey. So that podcast is Nutrition with Judy. And just recently, I started a more kind of community oriented podcast with a fellow carnivore friend. Her name's Laura Spath. And we did one called Cutting Against the Grain. And so this is more about lifestyle, right? So if you're eating meat based and you're still kind of struggling with the sugar demons, or you're still struggling with where to get your meat, or how to do this lifestyle long term, we talk about more on the fun side with a bit of science sprinkled in, but it just shares a little bit more real life and real conversations in terms of a meat-based diet.
That's excellent. We will put a link to all those places to find you in the notes section so people can find you easily.
Thank you.
And I really thank you for sharing your journey. I think it makes it so much more meaningful for people when they hear a story like that and then they see that there is a solution, and it gives a lot of hope for people that they can resolve their own health issues.
Yes. I mean, I healed a lot of my mental health and my eating disorder behaviors, but my mom and dad, they healed their metabolic disease. My mom was diabetic, struggled with asthma, would wake up in the middle of the night needing the asthma inhaler, struggled with dermatitis, edema in the end of the day. So she was wearing like 2 sizes bigger of shoes because her feet would swell. And now she's been eating meat-based for nearly 3 years, 0 medication. No hormone medication. She's almost 70, or she is 70. And no asthma inhaler. Doesn't wake up in the middle of the night to drink water or go to the restroom. So these are the stories. And then my dad struggled with like cholesterol and mood imbalances, and he's a lot better too. And so it's just when we hear these stories and we're just at a certain point, if we're just tired of standard care and it's just not working, or being on medication, or just not feeling well, depressed, low energy, maybe we just change our diet. And as simple as that sounds and hocus pocus, it's something worth trying. And just maybe 90 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And then you can always go back to how you eat now, how you feel now, because you have that baseline. Think of it as an experiment and just try. And who knows? I mean, it may heal you in ways that you never thought you could. And that is the power of food.
I think that's a wonderful place to end our chat today. Thank you again so much for coming along and sharing your wealth of knowledge with everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was fun. Thank you.